I want to tell you a little bit about how to conceptualize free will, I think, first, because it's obvious that we don't have infinite free will. Our choices are constrained in all sorts of ways. And I like to think about it, at least in part, the way that you think about a game. You know, if you're playing a game, obviously the game has rules. So if it's a chess game or a basketball game, then there are things that you can do and things that you can't do. And so it's a closed world in some sense. But the fact that there are things you can't do when you play a game also seem to open up a universe of possibilities for things that you can do. So chess obviously constrains you to a board and to a certain number of men and to a certain pattern of rules. But the strange thing is that when you put in those rules, because rules sound like limits, they sound always like things you can't do. But when you set up a constrained world like that and you lay out a system of rules, what you do is open up an infinity of a near infinity of possibilities. Same with music. You know, music has rules, obviously. And if you follow the rules, then you can make an infinite variety of music. And so there's a very interesting dynamic that's hard to understand between constraint and possibility. And there's a deep idea that's associated with that I read in some Jewish commentary on the biblical stories that I read a long time ago, talking about the relationship between God and man. And the idea was that God, imagine a being with the classical attributes of God, omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence, all-seeing, all-knowing, and all-powerful. What does a being like that lack? And obviously the answer is nothing, right? Because by definition, those three traits provide for absence of limitation, but then that's exactly what's lacking, is limitation. And there's some strange connection between limitation and I was saying, say, limitation that's rule governed, as I mentioned before, and the opening up of possibility. So it isn't necessarily the case that now determinism and limitation aren't exactly the same thing, but they're analogous and they need to be discussed together. Okay, so that's the first thing, is that whatever our free choice is, it isn't limited. It's limited. It's deeply limited. Phenomenologically, it seems clear that we have free choice, and it isn't obvious to me why we have consciousness if free choice isn't real, because consciousness looks to me like a mechanism that deals with potential before it's transformed into actuality, let's say. And I think consciousness is also the faculty, so to speak, or a manifestation of the faculty that enables us to pre-program deterministic actions. So again, let's think about someone playing the piano. They're practicing, after you repeat and you repeat your finger movements, if you're playing the piano, any complex motor skill is like that. You have to repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. And you're using consciousness to program it, to sequence the motor movements and to pay attention to them. That all seems voluntary, and it involves the activation of a tremendous amount of your brain, because if you're doing something new, a lot of your brain is activated. And then as you practice it, the amount of brain that's activated decreases. It shifts from right to left, and then it shifts from frontal to posterior, and a smaller and smaller area. So what's happening is that consciousness is creating little machines in the back of your head that do things in an automated manner. And the consciousness looks like consciousness appears and feels, that would be the phenomenological end, as if it's doing that voluntarily, and it is associated with a different pattern of brain activity. And so, okay, so there's that. There's the phenomenological reality of voluntary choice and effort as well, because conscious programming of that sort is also effortful. It doesn't seem to run deterministically like a clock does.